All right, gang. Welcome aboard once again. Time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. Sunday, October 15th, 2017. This week's edition is, as usual, is jam-packed with a bunch of stuff. So hopefully you'll find some useful information. We'll try to get everything squared away as quickly as we possibly can. All right, so let's get right on into things before we get too far behind schedule here. I want to start with something that I've experienced before, and it can be hard to track down what's causing this. Member Colin Webb had a situation where when he would log into the his Mac, when you log into the Mac, there were some Finder windows leading to folders that were popping open. Okay, and normally when you have something loading as the Finder loads, you would look in the login items, but there was nothing there that would lead to that kind of thing. Okay, and by the way, when you're looking at login items, hiding the item is not what gets it out of the way. You have to, if you don't want it to load, you have to delete it. But that wasn't what was causing the problem. Okay? Essentially, there are some situations, if you've got file sharing turned on, or you're using a network attached storage, or something of that nature, when those folders that are on that network device are mounted, usually those folders will open. I experienced this when I had my iTunes library on a NAS device. Every time the iTunes library loaded, every time that folder loaded, it would open the Finder window for that folder. I didn't want that to happen. I basically wanted it to open silently. That is to say, I wanted the NAS to have access to the folder, but not open up a folder window. So this thread goes through some things that you can do to run this down and see what the problem is. Essentially, you have to look at folders and see, is there any reason that one of these folders would be open? This thread kind of walks you through a couple of things to look for. And generally, when these folders open, it's because you're in a file sharing situation, either with a NAS or with another Mac, and something is requesting those folders. So that's how you start to go about tracking that down. All right, next on the list of things to do, a question here about facial recognition. Okay, on the new iPhone 8, well, on the anniversary edition of the iPhone, which is due out shortly. It's going to have facial recognition, and there was some question about how secure the data is on facial recognition. And there's a link to an article in this thread. I'm going to leave the link to the article. I want you to go to the thread, have a look at the article. As you can see when you look at our thread, some of the information that they talk about in the article is not 100% accurate. The reason I left the link in and I want to point to this thread is because this is an example of some of the misunderstandings that are out there in terms of how facial recognition is going to work. One of the things I can tell you is that from what we know right now, that facial recognition data does not sit on Apple's servers. It's sitting on the device, basically, okay? So some of the conclusions that they draw in this article are, shall we say, speculative at best. I mean, there's a lot of this might happen, this could happen, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind as you read various articles about facial recognition with the new iOS devices. And I suspect that variations of facial recognition are going to become more and more common. First of all, it's a cool feature, and a lot of people like cool features. And second of all, people are always looking for a potentially more secure way to handle the data that's on their devices. So I left that article, I put the thread here so you'd have a good summary of it, but I left the article not because the information is great, but because it gives you an example of what you see out there. And always you want to question the source of these kinds of articles. Is the technical information up to date? Ask a lot of questions. I know that not all of you follow technology. I know that many of our members basically just want to be able to use their Mac to accomplish something, and they don't want to get bogged down in the minutia of how facial recognition works and how this works and that works. That's okay. When you see something that just sounds like it's odd, start asking questions. I mean, I know for me, the first question I have when I see articles like that is, if this is this prone to error and buggy, it wouldn't have made it out of development. I mean, that's just my opinion. But keep that in mind as you're searching. I'll certainly be keeping an eye out on the facial recognition issue as those anniversary edition iPhones hit the market. We'll be looking at how good the information is, how accurate it is, and how secure it happens to be. If it's insecure, somebody's going to figure it out real quick once it gets into users' hands. All right. Now, I want to point out a couple other things. Jake, aka Mac in Win on the forum, went through a situation a couple of weeks ago where as he would be driving from one place to another and streaming music, the music would periodically drop out. You would lose connection, and therefore the music would drop out. Well, part of this, he finally figured out what was causing the problem, and I want to say thanks, Jake, for posting back with this. This is something that I would not have thought of as a possible cause for error. Jake lives in an area where Xfinity Wi-Fi is set up a situation where your router, unless you go in and reconfigure it, provides what amounts to a public hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot. It doesn't give people access to your data, but if they're passing by, they can bounce off of that hotspot and use it to access the web and other kinds of information. Well, Jake was running into a situation where as he would drive from one place to another, he would lose connection with the music would drop for a second or two, then it'd be picked up again, and then again, and again, and again, in this repeated process. And he finally figured out what was causing it. His iPhone, well, his iOS device, was picking up these unlocked networks, and it had all of them, or a great many of them, in the list in his phone. So as he would travel from one network to another, rather than sticking on one or using the cellular setup for data, it was bouncing between all of these various networks. And so he finally figured out a way to fix that problem. And I want to point you to the article that he linked to. He's responsible for this little bit of research. Okay, one thing that you want to do, if your phone or your device is accessing networks that you don't want to use, okay, this Macworld article tells you how to do it on your Mac, okay, how to rearrange the priority of the various networks, and you can also do this on your phone. Delete networks that you don't want your device to pick up, okay? This Macworld article is how to stop your Mac from auto-connecting. But you can also stop your phone. And I'm going to see if I can just real quickly here give you some idea of where you will have to go rather than the exact procedure. Okay, I'm going to get out of Safari here for a second, and I'm going to go into my settings. I've got some things open here that I thought I had closed earlier. All right, there we go, and we're going to look at settings. And when you start looking at things like network, I'm going to go up here to network, my Wi-Fi. And I don't have a lot of networks added. These that you see are networks that my phone sees nearby. As you can see, they're all password protected. But this is the pane that I would go to if I wanted to have it forget other networks on my phone. So I want to forget all the ones that I don't need and basically tell it to ignore those. All right, and I'm going to put Safari back up because we'll have a tip about Safari in just a minute in the show here. I'll put something specific to forgetting networks on the iPhone in the show notes. I thought I had that one up there, and it turns out I linked to the one that deals with forgetting networks on the Mac. Sorry about that, guys. All right, this is another one from member Doug Lassiter. As I told you last week, a lot of our content for the show comes from comments and questions made by members in the forum. And so I ran into this one from Doug, and he had an interesting issue. When he clicked on a link in the dock, instead of opening the link and opening that application, it would basically open the application folder and show you where that application was. Now, I was about for why that would happen when I read Doug's follow-up post. Let me show you what was happening and what was causing it. I'm going to use calendar. Well, let's just say, okay, I'm going to use my iBook program here as an example. Normally what happens is you click iBooks and it launches. Okay, welcome to iBooks. But watch what was happening to Doug. Okay, now I'm going to get one thing here. There we go. I'm going to make sure I quit this so you can see. Now I'm back completely out of iBooks. Watch what happens. Okay, and I'm going to open it. I open it here, and when I pick open, okay, it doesn't always open the program. What it does is, let me get you, here we go. I hit the wrong key before. There we go. Now, watch what happens. Normally it opens. I'm going to quit. All right, now watch this time what happens. Okay, there. It didn't open iBooks. It went to that application in your applications folder. Now, here's why that happened. The first time when it opened properly, I just clicked on iBooks. The second time, I had my finger on the command key, the command modifier key, or AKA the Apple key for us old timers. Okay, for those of us that have been around the Mac for a long time, we just can't get used to calling it the command key. It's always been it always will be the Apple key. So either way, it's the Apple key. What's happening is if you're holding that key down or the key is stuck when you try to launch something from the dock, it's going to bring you to that application rather than launching it. So you want to make sure that a key is not stuck. And it doesn't matter whether it's the left side key or the right side. Either key, either one of the Apple keys does the same thing. So make sure if you're seeing that kind of behavior, make sure that you don't have a key that's stuck in the down position. All right, and that led me to the next thing. which is something that I posted, or I linked to rather. As you can see, I linked to an article about Mac keyboard shortcuts, because this keyboard shortcut that Doug discovered, where if you have the command key down, have the Apple key pressed down, it leads you to the application as opposed to launching it. That's a keyboard command that I must admit, I either didn't know this or I had forgotten. I can't tell you which one it is. And the reason I linked to this list of commands is, for as long as I've been using the Mac, okay, there are some commands that I know just off the top of my head. For example, cut and paste, I know, obviously. Command C and Command V. Command C to cut, Command V to paste. But I cannot for the life of me, I can remember Command D to duplicate a file. I cannot for the life of me remember the keyboard sequence for screenshots. Okay? There are 2 or 3 different ones for screenshots. I can never remember what they are or which one I need for what situation. So, having said that, if you are a keyboard junkie and you like using the keyboard more than the mouse, there are a ton of keyboard commands that are usable on the Mac. And this is Apple's list. As you can see, there are standard commands for the OS. There are sleep, log out, and shutdown shortcuts, document shortcuts, Command Shift left arrow, Control A, all kinds of things. There are shortcuts for the Finder. That Command D, for example, to duplicate a file, that's one I remember quite often. Command E, I remember that one because I use it quite frequently. Okay. Command F, I remember that one to start a search. Okay. Command I, obviously, we use a lot. Here's where I start getting lost. These that have Shift and Command and something. Okay. And then, of course, you've got commands that are specific to certain applications. For example, Command T behaves differently in different applications. In Safari, it opens up a new tab. In Notes, it does something a little bit different. And down at the bottom here, you'll see a link to shortcuts for the accessibility features and a link to information about keyboard shortcuts for OS 8, for Safari 8 and 9. Most of those shortcuts also work in Safari 10 for Sierra. Many of them work in High Sierra as well, so I'll link you to that article. There are a ton of articles on the internet that lead you to these keyboard shortcuts. Some of them you will find useful, some of them you won't. Pick the ones that best suit your workflow. I find like I said, I find that I have trouble remembering a lot of them other than the ones that I use every day. So there are quite a few of these that I either never learned or I've used them once or twice and just forgotten them because they just haven't gone into the muscle memory because I haven't used them very much at all. Okay, now let me take a look at a couple other things and then we'll be done for the night. One of these, this comes from the Robservatory, Rob Griffith's blog. And because of all the issues with iTunes recently, you know that iTunes 12.7 took out some of the application management for iOS devices. You no longer do that in iTunes if you're running 12.7. You do it on the device. Many people did not like that. Apple has quietly released, without a lot of fanfare, a version of iTunes. It's officially tagged 12.6.3 that puts back a lot of that application management. Okay. Now, there are some issues in terms of whether you want to continue using 12.7 or whether you want to go back to 12.6.3. One of the issues is we don't know how long 12.6.3 is going to work. Okay, there are others. So if you are running 12.6.3 and you're happy with it, that's okay. A lot of people are looking for other alternatives. They've looked at third-party software. I'm running some third-party software to handle a lot of those things right now. Even the third-party software, though, doesn't go directly to the App Store and look for things. So Rob talked about a program called Apple Configurator 2. It's a free utility. And what it was originally written for is to allow businesses and other organizations that might be deploying a large number of iOS devices to basically set up a configuration that they would copy from one device to another. And that would alleviate some of the issues with people have, because unless you're using something like Configurator or 12.6.3, you're having trouble copying. Let's say you've downloaded a bunch of iOS apps and you want to put them on the other device, but you don't want to re-download them. That's kind of difficult to do with the iTunes 12.7 setup. Configurator takes care of that. This article gives you a little bit of an overview of what Configurator can do. One thing that it cannot do is go into the App Store and download programs. And I have to tell you, that's one thing that I find a tad bit annoying about the current setup with iTunes 12.7. I was on the iPhone Life site today following a tip just for a second to see if it worked. And I saw an application of vocabulary build, something worth trying. And I clicked on the link. And in the old days, it opened up the Apple page in Safari. It opened up the page to that link. But in the old days, I could have clicked on the link on that page and gone into the iTunes store and gotten the application. That part of it doesn't work anymore with the current setup. I have to go to it on the device, and I haven't done that yet just because it's going to take a little while to search for it, and I just haven't done it yet. But this configurator, I have not played with it yet. I've heard of it. One variation or another of it has been around for a while, kind of quietly. It's primarily aimed at institutions and the like, but it can be used by individual users. I'll be playing with it in the coming days, and I'll have some information on it on a future show, probably within the next week or two. And that should give you a way to do a few of the things that you've been wanting to do. All right, last, as far as our tips go this week, I want to point you to a tip from my buddy Rod Sprague. Rod discovered something. I'm sure I've done this before, but I don't use it a lot, and so it slipped my mind completely. I don't do a lot of web surfing on my phone. Screen's a little small for that for me. I don't like all that scrolling around just to read a web page, but I do use it from time to time if it's handy and I'm not near a computer. So here's a tip that Rod remembered. Now I'm going to pull up. I'm going to show you, I've got QuickTime running in the background so I can take a screenshot of my iPhone screen. And let me show you what I mean. Tip that Rod pointed out. This is my Safari window, obviously, from something that I looked up recently. And as you can see at the bottom of the bar there, I've got the backward and forward arrows. I've got a bookmark icon. And then Rod figured out a quick way to close all the open tabs. Now I'm going to touch that tab thing for a second. And as you can see, I've got quite a few tabs here. All right, so watch what happens. Let's say I want to clear all of these tabs out. All I have to do, hit the tab icon in the far right, hold it for a second. Don't just touch it and let go. Hold it. Now I have some choices. As you can see, I've got 24 tabs. My first choice will close all the tabs. The second choice closes the current tab. Third choice opens up a private tab. And the fourth one creates a new one. Let's just close all 24 of those tabs in one shot right on. I'm going to pick that first option right there. All right, and there, we're back to my bookmark page. And lo and behold, look what I've got here. When I touch this time, that 24 tab option is not there because all of those tabs have been closed in one quick press. I don't have to go through and close tab by tab by tab. I've done that before just because I didn't think of this tip or didn't know it, one or the other. So that's a good tip for this week for our iPhone